who, Vete, knows, Vuman, O Supreme Great One, Bhagavan, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, Pada Atman, the O Supreme Soul, Yoga Ishvara, O Master of Mystic Power, Uttahi, the pastimes, Bhavataha, of your Lordship, Trilokyam, in the three worlds, Va, where, Va, or, Katam, how, Va, or, Kate, how many, Va, or, Kada, when, Iti, thus, Vistarayan, expanding, Kridasi, you play, Yogamayam, your spiritual energy. The translation, O Supreme Great One, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, O Super Soul, Master of all mystic power, your pastimes are taking place continuously in these three worlds, but who can estimate where, how, and when you are employing your spiritual energy and performing these innumerable pastimes? No one can understand the mystery of how your spiritual energy acts. So, purport by His Divine Grace, actually by the servants of His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Brahma previously stated that Lord Krishna incarnates among the demigods, human beings, animals, fish, and so on. This does not mean, however, that the Lord is degraded by his incarnations. As Brahma clarifies here, no conditioned soul can understand the transcendental nature of the Lord's activities, which he enacts through his spiritual potency. Although the Lord is Bhuman, the supremely great one, he is still Bhagavan, the supremely beautiful personality exhibiting pastimes of love in his own abode. At the same time, he is Paramatma, the all-pervading super soul, who witnesses and sanctions all the activities of conditioned souls. The Lord's multiple identities is explained by the term Yogeshvara. The absolute truth is the master of all mystic potencies, and although he is one and supreme, he manifests his greatness and opulence in many different ways. Such elevated spiritual masters can hardly be understood by matters can hardly be understood by foolish persons primitively identifying themselves with the insignificant material body. These conditioned souls, such as atheistic scientists, consider their own puffed-up intelligence supreme. Gullibly placing their firm faith in material illusion, they are captured by the modes of nature and driven far away from knowledge of God. So, Koveti Bhuman Bhagavan Paratman Yogeshwaraktir Bhavatas Trilokyam Vavakatan Vakati Vakateti Vistarayan Kridasi Yugamayam. So, Omagana Tivadanda Shah Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshur Medikam Yena Tasmai Shigarve Namaha. So one thing we could note here is that Krishna is doing all these things simultaneously. Simultaneously means at the same time. So in other words, he has all these various incarnations, which Srila Prabhupada points out here are eternal. The Nitya Leela, for example, as Prabhupada did point out, that Krishna's pastimes of appearing in the material world are occurring somewhere in some universe at this very moment. And Krishna's pastimes of driving the chariot of Arjuna are occurring somewhere in some material world, some material universe, right now. And Krishna's pastimes of stealing the butter are occurring, and feeding to the monkeys, are occurring somewhere, in some universe, right now. It's amazing, isn't it? And, of course, that's pointed out in the pastime of Narada Muni visiting Dwarka to see Krishna in his various homes. And in each and every home, Krishna was doing something different with his family, right? He was playing with some of the kids, talking to his wife in another home, and Narada Muni was amazed. So Krishna here is described in this verse as Yogeshvara. So an ordinary yogi, he can expand himself, like Prabhupada said, up to about 9 times. And in each of those expansions, he's doing the same thing. It's like a television expansion. Like, for example, if you go into a store that's selling televisions and they're displaying the image of some program, wherever it is, then all the images are exactly the same, unless they're on a different channel. But let's say they're all on the same channel. They're all exactly the same image. Of course, some televisions have a better image than others, but depending on how expensive they are. But the point is that yoga people, they can only do that. They cannot be in many places simultaneously doing different things. They can be in many places simultaneously doing the same thing. So that's this type of expansion. It's like, I was going to mention this yogi Shobhari Muni, who got married to something like 40-something daughters of King Mandaka, and he had to do the same thing with all of his different wives. So anyway, so that's one point here. And I want to talk a little bit about Krishna's incarnations and different forms, and I wanted to make reference to Srila Prabhupada's book called The Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, which some of you may have read, which I doubt. And it's a very important book. It came out before the Chaitanya Charitamrita came out, and it's actually a summary of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the teachings. And there's 2 chapters here in this book that are very much related with this particular subject matter, chapters 7 and 8, chapter 7 deals with the unlimited forms of Godhead, and chapter 8 deals with the different avatars or incarnations, but they're both dealing with different incarnations and avatars. And amongst those different, I don't know if I'm going to read it all, but I'll make reference to it. Amongst those different avatars and incarnations, there's various categories. For example, you have the Purusha avatars. Purusha, of course, Purusha means person, also means male in relationship to Prakriti. But in this particular instance and context, it means the 3 manifestations of Vishnu that deal with the material world. That's Mahavishnu, whose breathing out causes the material universe to emanate from his body and also from the pores of his body. His breathing in causes the pralaya, dissolution. And then after that, you have the Garbhodakshay Vishnu, who is in the womb of every universe, and he creates the Garbhodak ocean by his perspiration. And then after that, you have the Kshirodakshay Vishnu, who is within each and every atom. So these are called the Purusha avatars. That's one type of avatar. Another type of avatar is the Manvantara avatar. Manvantara means the Manu cycles. There's 14 Manu cycles in each day of Lord Brahma. And of course, each day of Lord Brahma's Sahasra Yuga Paryantam, 1,000 Divya Yugas. That means the 4 cycles of yugas together. And anyway, so there's 14 of those, and some of those are Vishnu Tattva, and some of those are Jiva Tattva, depending on the circumstances. So that's another type of incarnation. Another type of incarnation is the Shaktavesha incarnation. Shaktavesha, of course, means empowered, Shakti. Like we talk about Kali Kalera Dharma Krishna Namasankirtan Krishna Shakti Vinamehi Tari Pravartana. That in this age of Kali, this is a verse from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Yuga Dharma is Krishna Nam Sankirtan, but one must be empowered, Shakti. One must have the power. Just like in that movie, oh my God, should make reference to it. They say, let the force be with you. Anyway, none of you have seen the movie, thank God. No, thank God. Anyway, Star Wars. Anyway, so they let the force be with you. So that's the Shakti from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so that's a jiva soul who has some power, not only the power to preach, but the power, let us say, to be a king. Like Prithu Maharaj, who is considered an incarnation of Krishna, is that type of avatar. He's a Shaktivesh avatar. He's given the power or potency to be a king. So Prabhupada is a Shaktivesh avatar. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur is a Shaktivesh avatar. Of course, Lord Brahma is a Shaktivesh avatar. Narada Muni is a Shaktivesh avatar. Jesus Christ is a Shaktivesh avatar. And Prabhupada even considered Mohammed to be a Shaktivesh avatar. Empowered by God. Generally, it means someone coming from the spiritual world, but actually it's the Shakti that empowers. Someone can be a Shaktivesh avatar and also be a sadhana siddha devotee. Sadhana siddha devotee means a devotee who became perfect in this lifetime by performing sadhana. So a Shaktivesh person doesn't necessarily have to be a Nitya siddha devotee. He can be a sadhana siddha devotee. Interesting. So other types of avatars, of course, then you have the Guna avatar. Guna means quality. Of course, in this particular context, it means the three modes of nature. That's Brahma, Vishnu, and Lord Shiva. Brahma is in charge of passion, Vishnu is in charge of goodness, and Lord Shiva is in charge of ignorance. But that doesn't mean they're ignorant or passionate. They're just basically in charge of those particular modes of nature. And then you have the Yuga avatars. A Yuga avatar means that in each and every Yuga there's an incarnation of Krishna that appears to teach the Yuga Dharma. Yuga Dharma, so like there's the white incarnation of Krishna in the Satya Yuga, then the red in the Treta Yuga, and then the blackish in the Dwapara Yuga. Of course, that's Krishna. And then in Kali Yuga, the incarnation is also blackish, except in the case when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appears, which is once in a day of Lord Brahma. So every day Lord Brahma gets to see Lord Chaitanya and Krishna. It's nice, isn't it? Because Lord Chaitanya appears directly after Krishna appears. So Krishna appears in the Dwapara, and Lord Chaitanya appears in the Kali Yuga. But generally, other than those particular instances, then the incarnation is blackish, not golden or yellow color. So those are called Yuga avatars. And of course, there's the Yuga Dharma, taught by the Yuga avatar, and Yuga Dharma in the Satya Yuga is meditation. Yuga Dharma in the Treta Yuga is generally big fire sacrifices, yagyas. Yuga Dharma in the Dwapara Yuga is opulent temple worship, and Yuga Dharma in Kali Yuga is, guess what? Nobody knows, because nobody's listening. So what's the Yuga Dharma in Kali Yuga? Does anyone know? Yeah, Krishna Nam Sankirtan. So there's a particular Dharma. The other Dharmas are still present. Like we can meditate on Krishna's pastimes, we can have fire sacrifices, and we can do opulent deity worship, but they're not the primary practices. The primary practice is Krishna Nam Sankirtan in Kali Yuga, and the other yugas it's different. But Krishnam Sankirtan is also present in other yugas. So, interesting. And then finally there's the Leela avatars. And the Leela avatars are very, very interesting. I have a whole list of them here, which is, actually I wrote them down. So, there's that piece of paper I had a second ago. Here it is. So the Leela avatars are mentioned in the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And some of them are actually Vishnu Tattva, some of them are Jiva Tattva. So here's the list of the Leela avatars, just so you know who they are. There's the Kumaras, the 4 Kumaras. They're considered Leela avatars. And actually their story, I can quickly tell the story of each of the Leela avatars, because Leela means pastime. Like Prabhupada would criticize impersonalists who would say they're God and they said their whole life is a pastime. And then Prabhupada said they're getting old. Is that a pastime? They're having to go to the doctor, they're having to go to the dentist. That's obviously not a pastime. So, anyway, so the 4 Kumaras, they're incarnations of the Lord's knowledge potency. And they, of course, became Krishna conscious when they smelled the tulsi leaves and the flowers offered to the lotus feet of the Lord. When they went to see the Lord in Vaikuntha and they were stopped by Jai and Vijay. And they're very well known for preaching Krishna consciousness. And then after that, another Leela avatar is Narada. In fact, Narada is a Leela avatar, and he's a Jiva soul, and so are the 4 Kumaras. And we all know the story of Narada. Then there's Varaha, the boar incarnation of the Lord, who saved the earth from the Garbhodak ocean and fought with Hiranyaksha, the dearmost brother of Hiranyakashipu. Then there's Matsya. Matsya is a quite interesting personality, because there's even a Purana named after him. Obviously, it's the Matsya Purana. And the Matsya story is very much similar to the story of the flood in the Bible. You know the story? Anyway, the Bible story is once upon a time, there was this guy, Noah. I don't know what that means in Sanskrit, Noah. Anyway, and he was told by God, I'm going to kill everybody because they're too sinful, and I'm going to save you and your family, and you save all the animals and come aboard this, what they called an ark, Noah's Ark. And there was a big flood for 49 days and 49 nights, and the whole earth was inundated. And basically, after 49 days and 49 nights, then they saw a dove. A dove means a bird, with some flowers or some leaves, and they understood they were saved, and they lived happily ever after. Anyway, that's just Bible. So in the Matsya Avatar story, we have King Satyavrata, was the original name of Noah, I guess. So King Satyavrata, he's told the same. Actually, first of all, King Satyavrata is offering oblations in the river, and as he's offering oblations in the river, he sees a little fish in his hands. He says, "This is not good." He wants to throw the fish back in the river, and what happens is the fish says, "Don't throw me back in the river because I'm going to be eaten by the other fish." So he puts the fish in the little bowl, and then the fish grows very, very quickly, and the fish says, "It's too small for me," and then he puts the fish in a bigger container, and then the fish grows and it's too big, and he puts the fish in a well, it's too big, and he puts the fish in a lake, and the fish is too big, and he puts the fish, and the fish keeps growing, in the ocean, and he says, "Who are you? You must be the Supreme Personality, God." That story is in the Bhagavatam. And then the fish explains to him that, he's God. And then there's going to be an inundation, and he should take a boat and tie with Vasuki to the fish. The fish sort of has a horn on his head or something like that. And the Vedas are saved at the same time because they have the sages come on the boat. And interesting. And also Matsya Avatar is involved, according to Matsya Purana, he's involved in another story about how this demon named Hayagriva, not the incarnation of Krishna. Krishna has an incarnation named Hayagriva. But this demon Hayagriva stole the Vedas, and he took it down to the netherworlds, and the Matsya Avatar saves the Vedas. So that's another story. That's from the Matsya Purana. There's some reference to it in the Padma Purana too. So that's Matsya Avatar. So these are Leela means these are very playful things that are going on. Even if it happened. Matsya, of course, is Vishnu Tattva. There's Yagya, the Yagya Avatar. There's the Narayan Avatar. Narayan is actually Krishna and Arjuna. Nara is Arjuna, the same personality. And of course Narayan is Krishna. And they were executing austerities in there, and they were tested by Indra and all of his dancing girls, and basically they passed the test. Not only did they pass the test, but they created their own apsara for Indra to take back with him, and that's where Urvasi came from. That's Narayan. Then there's Lord Kapiladev, the son of Devahuti, who taught Sankhya philosophy, theistic Sankhya philosophy. There's Dattatreya, the son of Atri Muni, who is sometimes considered an incarnation of the three personalities, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. There's the Hayagriva incarnation. Hayagriva means the horsehead incarnation of Krishna. So sometimes Krishna not only appears in different species of life, but he invents his own species that are not species. That's pretty interesting, isn't it? Like Prabhupada said, Krishna has incarnations in all the 8,400,000 species of life. And so, actually he has more than that because there's no such species as a horse-headed human being. So Krishna invents his own species that don't even exist for particular purposes. So in other words, he's having a good time. As we mentioned yesterday, whatever Krishna does, it's for his own enjoyment. It says, Hayagriva, I want to get through the whole list. There's the Hamsa incarnation, that means the swan incarnation who spoke Vedic knowledge. There is Prishnigarbha. Prishnigarbha is the one who appeared before Dhruva Maharaj when Dhruva Maharaj was very upset because he couldn't sit on the lap of his father. He wanted to meditate, and eventually he saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There's Rishabhadev. Rishabhadev is, of course, the incarnation of the Lord, who had 100 sons, and his son's top son was Bharat Maharaj, who you're familiar with. And Rishabhadev executed Jata Yoga at the end of his pastimes. Jata Yoga means he just walked around like an idiot so that he would be detached from the material world. That's a type of yoga, and later on the Jains adopted that in an improper way. You understand? Jata Yoga. So, then after Rishabha, there's Prithu Maharaj, the ideal king, Lord Nrsingadev, who you're all familiar with. There's Kurma. Kurma is the tortoise incarnation who allowed the Mandara hill, which was used to churn the milk ocean, to rest on his back. So, because he was the place for the pivot rod. You understand? And it's described that he was getting a back scratch at the same time and having his jewels polished. Then that's Kurma. So Kurma, also there's a place in South India, Kurmakshetra. There's a temple to Kurma. There's Dhanvantari, who came out of the milk ocean, who is the medical incarnation of the Supreme Lord. There's Mohini, who is the beautiful female incarnations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who bewildered the atheist and convinced the atheist to divide the nectar up fairly, but actually she wasn't fair. She gave it to the demigods. And then she cut off the head of Rahu. And there's stories about that. Then there's Vamana, the dwarf incarnation of the Lord, who tricked Bali Maharaj. Then there's Parishuram. Parishuram killed all the Kshatriyas like 21 times, created, as we mentioned yesterday, like lakes of blood. Then there's Lord Ram, and I think you're all familiar with Lord Ram, right? No one's here heard of Lord Ram? Okay, too bad. There's Vyasadeva, there's Balaram, there's Krishna, there's Buddha, there's Kalki, who appears at the end of this yuga, and he kills all the rascals. So anyway, these are the different Leela avatars of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In addition to all these avatars, I'm just going to go quickly through what's described here. There's a lot of information. Each and every month of the year has a particular manifestation of the Lord that is the presiding deity of the month. And there's 12 different months. And there's different planets in the spiritual world, 24 different forms of the Lord in the spiritual world that are the predominating deities or predominating, let's say, worshipable persons in the Vaikuntha planets. And each one of those incarnations has, the reason I'm raising my hands, because I don't have 4 hands, but I only have 2, it has their symbols in different places on each of the hands, because the Lord has 4 hands. So these are some things, and let's see, what else is there? It's really interesting. And then, and then there's also different, let's see, what else is described here? 4 Yuga avatars I described, 14. Anyway, so these are described in this particular, as well as the different Sanskrit designations for each type of avatar. There's Vilas, Vaibhava, Prakash, and you can read these chapters to understand these Sanskrit designations for the different avatars. This is very scientific information. In no other religious literature or literatures do you find this delineation of the Lord's avatars, the nature of the soul, the nature of the material world. This is called Sambandha Gyan. And so this is postgraduate study of the science of God. So any questions or comments? Yes?
So when Lord Krishna appeared in Vrindavan and
Yeah.
made his pastimes in Mathura and Dwarka, were the associates demigods or there are
That's a good question. As far as Vrindavan are concerned, the associates were the Nityasiddha devotees and those who were just becoming Krishna conscious. Those are the 2 types of associates. In other words, as Srila Prabhupada described, when someone becomes Krishna conscious, the first birth after that, rather than going back to the spiritual realm, is to take birth where Krishna's pastimes are taking place, to get further training before you're qualified to go back to the spiritual world. So those are the associates in Vrindavan. Outside of Vrindavan, in Mathura and Dwarka, then you have the Nityasiddha devotees, and of course also those who are coming for the first time to take part in Krishna's pastimes, because they have that different mood, other than the Vrindavan pastimes. And then you have the demigods. Especially in Dwarka, there's a mention that the demigods are some of the associates of Krishna in Dwarka and some of the associates of Nityasiddha devotees. And the demigods are the ones who fought each other off during the Moksha Lila. The Moksha Lila is sometimes described as the, let us say, illusory pastime of the Supreme Lord, because that's the pastime where Krishna left this world apparently being struck in the foot by a hunter. So part of that Moshe Lila story told in the Bhagavatam is that the sages cursed the residents of Dwarka to basically die because they had been offended by Krishna's son Samba. Krishna's son Samba, actually, he was Jambavati's son. He was very cheeky. So he and the other boys approached the sages, and he had put something like a pillow or something in his stomach. So it appeared, and he dressed like a girl. And so they asked, the other boys asked the sages, what type of child is this little girl going to give birth to? And the sages got very angry because they were being teased in that way, including Narada Muni, and they cursed. They said, this boy or this girl will give birth to an iron club that will be the cause of the destruction of the Yadu dynasty. And so eventually Samba gave birth to a club. That club was brought to King Ugrasena, who heard the whole story. King Ugrasena had the club ground up into little bits, thrown into the ocean. And those bits, or little powder, came back and it grew into canes. Not exactly sugar cane, but really strong canes that were like iron canes. And the Yadu dynasty, and of course there was one piece they couldn't grind up, which is like in the shape of an arrowhead, and that became the arrow that was supposedly shot at Krishna's feet, lotus feet, by the hunter Chira. So eventually the members of the Yadu dynasty got drunk, fought with each other, killed each other off, and left this world. But those members who did that, they were the demigods. That's the reason I'm telling the story. They were the demigods, not the eternal associates of the Lord. And the demigods were going back to their kingdom. Because in every case, when the Lord descends, he has the demigods come to assist him in the mission of Paritranaya Sadhunam Vinashaya Chidushkritam. So either the demigods come or they expand themselves. Like you have the case of Hanuman, who was an expansion of Lord Shiva. So Lord Shiva appeared through Hanuman. Hanuman is not Lord Shiva. Hanuman is not Vishnu. I know they have this this complete concocted deity and misunderstanding of Hanuman, this Panchamukha Hanuman, which some of you may have seen, which is completely Mayavad, impersonal, nonsense, rascaldom. Don't tell anyone I said that. They'll kill me. So it's, it's rascaldom, because that depicts Hanuman as basically God. And he's not Lord Shiva, he's the son of Lord Shiva and Parvati. Through, through the womb of Anjani. That's a whole story we're not going to tell right now. But, and Hanuman is also an eternal associate of Lord Ram. It's not that he just became an associate. He was always an associate, but he appeared in a certain way, just like Krishna is always the Supreme Personality of God, and it appears like Krishna was born. In the same way it appears like Hanuman was born, but he's an eternal associate of the Lord. So anyway, so the demigods do appear. And in Vrindavan, you just have the Nityasiddha devotees and those who just became Krishna conscious. But outside of Vrindavan, you have the demigods. So, does that answer the question? So, any other questions or comments or problems? Yes, Rupanuga.
At what stage of our emotional sense do we realize our Swarup Siddhi?
That's interesting. So, actually, there's the beginning of realization of who you are in the spiritual world when you enter into the Raganuga platform. You're not yet a pure devotee. This is according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur in the Jaiva Dharma. When you But that means to come to the Raganuga platform, you have to surpass the Anartha and the Vritti platform. There's different stages. Ado, Shradatata, Sadhu Sangota, Bhajana Kriya. In the beginning, there's initial faith, then you associate with the devotees, and then after that, you execute devotional service, following in their footsteps, and then you work on your anarthas. Anarthas means lust, anger, greed, illusion, envy, fear. And then when you work on those anarthas, then you become nishta. Nishta means you're steady. And steadiness, the stage of nishta, in other words, at least you have to be at the stage of nishta. Steadiness or nishta means not only that you have good sadhana, but the rest of the day you're pretty cool. You're fixed. A lot of people have good sadhana. They get up early, just haribol, mangalarti ki jai. But the rest of the day, they're getting angry, they're getting lusty. What else? They're fearful of the ghosts. You see people in Fiji, oh, the ghosts, I better go to just, not taking shelter of the holy name, or they're yelling at their wife. So that's not, that's not nishta. Nishta means 24/7. So that's really the point. So when one's nishta, the process is that one starts to get a glimpse and gets to specific attraction to certain persons in the spiritual world and certain relationships in the spiritual world. And one then goes to their spiritual authority, Siksha Guru, Diksha Guru, whatever, someone who reveals their mind in confidence. Guyamakyati Prichati. It's like yesterday I got a letter from someone. They said, a few months ago, this amazing realization, and then they started telling everybody about it. I said, you don't do that. If you have some amazing realization, it's like your beads. You keep them in a bead bag. It's described your Ishtadeva, your beads, your Gayatri thread, whatever, when you're chanting Gayatri. You don't have it out in the open. There's a reason for that. Actually, as far as the Gayatri mantra, chanting your Gayatri mantra, keeping your hand under your cloth, the reason is because it's something personal. It's something very deep and personal. I mean, what are you doing when you're chanting the Gayatri? You're chanting something very intimate. You have the Gopal mantra, which is pretty intimate, and then the Kama Gayatri, because some of you are not initiated. But the Kama Gayatri is the most intimate, as Radha and Krishna and intimate pastimes. So you just don't really reveal that in front of everybody. Some people say, you put your hand under the cloth because if you take your hand out, the demons will steal your mantra. Not true. If a piece of cloth could protect you from demons, that's pretty good. Just like I was told when I first took sannyas that this upper cloth that the sannyasis have protects you from women. It's like the male version of a burqa. Anyways, it doesn't work like that. So anyway, so what happens is that one approaches someone, doesn't have a whole discussion on the internet that, I've just realized my spiritual identity. And then you put a picture of yourself as a gopi on your Facebook page. So, my name is Beer Gopi. Not very appropriate. Anyways, it's something very private. And then you act, even if you're on that platform, you act like a sadhaka. In other words, no one could detect. Because Prabhupada, he did not go around telling people his spiritual identity. And people asked, he said, that question you do not need to ask. You know, in other words, none of your business, buddy. So, yes, when you're Nishta, you'll get some glimpse. It's like the sun coming up in the morning. You begin to see certain things. And then, you know, there's a process. There's a process. But it's just a very private thing. And you have to have a spiritual authority who you consult about these things. But don't worry. Just be a doctor right now. Anyway, so don't worry about it. It's a really, the Raganuga is also sadhana, it's also practice. But Vaidhi comes first. And you know you're ready for Raganuga when you're just steady all the time. Not just when you feel some happiness. I mean, we all feel some ecstasy, because that's one of the first things you experience in Krishna consciousness, according to Nectar Devotion, is immediate relief from all stress, right? That's one of the first things. It is the first thing, according to Srila Rupa Goswami. So that doesn't mean you're on a high platform. Oh, I'm in ecstasy in kirtan, Haribol. And the next minute you're overeating. You know, it just doesn't fit. The two don't fit together. So yes, we do experience ecstasy. We do have happiness. We do have relief from material distress. However, we may not be on that high platform unless it's 24 hours a day. I mean, what was your dream like last night? Were you dreaming of Krishna? Were you dreaming of the spiritual master? Were you planning on how to spread the Krishna consciousness movement? What were you doing? What was your focus? Just like we're reading Prabhupada's memories of Prabhupada now, the programs in the evening or the breakfast you go. And you'll see that Srila Prabhupada, even in the final days, his concern was simply preaching. He could hardly move his body. The devotees had to bathe him, take him to the bathroom, and he was still meeting with different important people trying to present Krishna consciousness. So that's Nishta. I mean, Prabhupada's on a higher platform than Nishta, but even when you're on the very highest platform, Krishna Prema, you have the qualities of the lower stages. In other words, you're still Nishta. You still have Bhava. You still have Ruchi. Anyway, so be patient. Be patient and have a lot of patience. Make your patience Krishna conscious and be patient with your patience. How about that? Okay, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premananda.